now the podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the podcast where we talk about horror, mostly. Sometimes we talk about other things, and sometimes we swear. We're not really going to be talking about horror this episode. Spoiler. It's going to be a little bit adjacent, but hopefully still very interesting to you. Joining me for this discussion of the new and just announced multiple Oscar-nominated movie from last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once, is the marvellous Kirsty Warrer. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello. Hi, Dan.
Hello. And this, of course, is, as Kirsty just indicated, Dan, aka TD Velasquez. Welcome, everybody. Kirsty, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I was just, when you were talking about the Oscar nominations yesterday. Yes, was it yesterday? I've forgotten where we are because the world feels like Everything Everywhere All at Once. It got 11 nominations and it leads the pack with 11 nominations, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant that a film like this with the kind of, I don't know, how do you describe the film? It's difficult to encapsulate, but I was so utterly delighted to hear that it's been nominated in all of the kind of categories that it has, including, I have to say, I was saying to my husband, I was really surprised that the Daniels, the directors of the film, got a Best Director nomination because of their previous work. I wasn't sure the Academy necessarily was going to go for a Best Director nomination for the directors of Swiss Army Man and Guns Akimbo. It feels like an unlikely kind of trajectory for them, but I'm delighted that the film's done so well. So
yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. The Oscars are often given to great movies, but there's also a very strong tendency that the movies are kind of middle of the road. There needs to be something about them which is kind of easily generalised, has some appeal to everybody, in order to get the votes. This movie, I do think it has something for everybody, as we'll get into, but it is a very unique piece of work. There aren't many movies that you can compare it to, and it doesn't at all. It doesn't at all have the kind of long-time traditional Oscar movie elements to it.
No.
I mean, I think that might be a sign that this is changing in recent years. I mean, I still can't believe that The Shape of Water won Best Picture a few years ago, for instance.
Yeah. No, I mean, I suppose I hadn't thought about it in that term.
And then Parasite as well,
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of those movies, so I can't comment on the films themselves, but they just don't look to me like the kind of thing that you...
I can.
Go on then.
Because I have seen them. So, right. I mean, I think the Oscars is, has been under pressure, hasn't it, recent years about trying to sort of diversify its nominations, particularly in terms of race and gender, and that's good and right. And we're, they're obviously on a journey there. We're not quite there yet. However, The Shape of Water. I'm going to say something controversial now. I thought it was a very, very lovely and charming Jean-Pierre Jeunet movie.
All right, that's interesting. Well, it looks like one, yeah.
And so I did, I have a lot of time for Guillermo del Toro, but it felt didn't quite feel like his work. It felt like Jean-Pierre Jeunet. It felt sort of chocolate boxy, with a sort of slightly dark edge, and it was very lovely and compelling. But there's the Oscar movies, don't they? They kind of often have that kind of sort of sense of gentle quality about them. Which The Shape of Water definitely had, and Parasite also has. Parasite, I mean, so well done, so well directed, well acted, well played, and kind of goes into unexpected territory and really, really great. I mean, both films I think are worth your time. they both have that sort of sense of, oh, this is kind of the quality end of genre, if that makes any sense. Whereas Everything Everywhere All at Once is, an assault in lots of different ways. And it doesn't have that sort of. I was thinking about it have you seen one of the other pictures that's got, I only use the word picture around Oscar time, I don't know why. One of the other films that has got a lot of recognition is The Banshees of Inisherin.
I haven't seen it. I've seen the trailer a lot. I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
It's on Disney Plus, isn't it? But no,
yeah,
not yet.
It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Really brilliantly done. Very, very kind of what you would expect from, the guy who did In Bruges and Three Billboards and all of that kind of stuff.
Which I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, but again, it does have, even though it has a sort of dark edge, it does feel to like a very not safe Oscar film, but brilliant performances, sweeping landscape. There's a bit of kind of arty nicheness going on with it. So that, So I think the other films that are nominated for Best Picture they feel like much more kind of traditional Oscar films. Everything. I'm just going to call it Everything now. Everything doesn't feel that way.
It's a difficult title to rattle off.
Yeah, so that's, I think, for me, why it feels like such a delight that it's done so well. I did think that Michelle Yeoh would get a nomination, rightly so, but I didn't expect it to be as successful overall in the nominations. So,
it is a beautifully. I mean, basically, the 4 main actors in it have all been nominated, haven't they?
Yeah.
So across the board, and quite rightly, because they are amazing. They're all amazing. Let's get into talking about the movie. Yeah. But I also want to give people a chance to jump off, because we are going to talk about this movie in a spoilerific fashion. We had a little chat before the recording. We think it's the only way to do it. Usually we have 20 minutes of spoiler-free chat on one of these reviews. I don't think it's possible to have a spoiler-free chat about this movie, and actually, I don't know what you think, Kirsty. I feel like, based on my experience, this is the kind of movie where going into it knowing as little as possible is a real benefit.
Yeah.
I mean, I went into it knowing Michelle Yeoh was in it. There was something about parallel universes, and that's it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything else. It's full of delight. But I also want to address, before we go into depth on it, there was an interesting exchange on Facebook between us when we said we were doing it, and Ian said, "But is it horror?" And I suddenly thought, well, I guess it isn't, but we just talked about talking about it, and I never questioned that. I suppose I can't justify in any way that this is horror, but I do think that it should. Well, I feel like it's not horror because it's not really frightening. It doesn't really draw on any elements of horror, but I do think there's something about the movie which we can get into in spoilerific fashion that horror fans will particularly enjoy. I think it has a kind of edginess that maybe a horror audience would be more comfortable with than a general audience. So I do think it's worth talking about. Also, I can mention this even though I didn't know it when I was seeing it, but anyone who reads the cast list, this is a movie which has got Jamie Lee Curtis and James Hong in it. It's practically a John Carpenter film, just for that. Not in any other way really, but and also it's not horrific, but there's a sort of grossness to points of it. Specifically, the fingers that are hot dogs, where it's just like it's not horrible, but every time that was on, I was kind of like, whoa. There's a sort of surrealist sort of body horror. I mean, obviously firmly tongue in cheek, but there's something kind of very
unsettling and visceral about the hot dog
Yes.
fingers.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when it becomes clear that the hot dog fingers come with tomato, ketchup, and mustard.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to phrase it like that, but that does seem appropriate. I thought I was being purely descriptive, but anyway. So, gosh, but let's move on from that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that we both love the movie, and anyone who's not seen it and wants to experience the full delight of it, go watch it. Don't listen to this. But having given that warning, we're going to talk about what is in this extraordinary movie. Kirsty, I shall ask you I shall offer you the first opportunity to just rain down your thoughts.
Okay.
Inspired by this movie.
Okay, so I think the first thing to acknowledge with this one is that I saw it in the cinema. I was lucky enough. It was one of the few films last year, kind of post-COVID, and with cinema still kind of, responding to and trying to recover from that I actually thought, no, I need to see this in the cinema. And what's interesting is that I saw it in the same week as Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. So,
which is the nearest comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
To this movie.
And it's weird that they were both out in the, at the cinema. I think they were released within a week of each other as well. So, this was it was the second one I saw out of the two. So, so it was really fascinating. It's kind of just getting to the end of that and going, out of the two multiverse films that I've seen this week, which one did I prefer? And it was undoubtedly this one, just because obviously I, had a lot of love for Marvel, but I very much feel like I'm suffering from Marvel fatigue, generally speaking. And I don't, I know obviously the focus is not on critiquing Doctor Strange. I think Benedict Cumberbatch is a very fine actor, but I find him really dislikable as Stephen Strange. He's not for me in that particular role. And so Everything Everywhere All at Once I was really intrigued by. I've got to be honest, I know the reputation of Swiss Army Man, but I've not seen it. But I did see Guns Akimbo, which was a lot of fun, like stupid fun.
Right.
But kind of good, gratuitous and violent, and confrontational and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know anything about that movie.
It's kind of like Daniel Radcliffe. Basically, because the conceit is that he somehow finds himself embroiled in this sort of like dark web kind of game thing where he wakes up and he's basically had guns a kind of staple to his hands, so he can't remove them.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's the so, and then he's like, there are people after him as part of the game or whatever, and it's just bonkers. But it was very, very entertaining. So I was kind of keen to see it, and when I saw the trailer, and obviously it's A24, so it comes with all the expectations of an A24 movie. So I was kind of really excited to see it, and when I saw it in the cinema, it was just delightful, just absolutely delightful in every way possible. It felt like, and as a film fan and somebody spent my entire life with film, it's rare that I feel like I'm watching something that feels fresh. And although this is very cine literate and there are lots of references to films and and it clearly kind of comes from a place that's quite sort of Matrix inspired, it just felt like watching something that was very, very new and fresh and interesting. And I was reading or watching, I think it was just basically talked about it as being the first sort of properly post-internet movie.
Okay, it's interesting.
So for me, one of the kind of key, you said it's not horror, and I think that's true, but actually no, it was a video essay, which is called actually something like The Terror of Everything Everywhere All at Once, something like that.
Okay.
And it was just talking about it as it's really, in some ways, it's about the the kind of internet experience of existing on social media and having access to everything in the world.
Right.
And
Okay.
that, so part of the way the film does that wonderful thing of just sort of switching really quickly between aesthetics and genres, and and it's kind of, it moves in this really frenetic way through sort of genre spaces that feels a bit like kind of scrolling through social
Yes.
media. And I thought, oh gosh, I hadn't thought about it in those terms. But then connecting it to that, to go back to one of the things we talked about in the music episode about, kind of Bo Burnham, that funny feeling, that sort of sense of sort of derealization and being kind of existing in this weird sort of digital space where nothing seems real anymore. That there's elements of that in the film, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it gains a sort of unsettling quality. You start to sort of see that in it, and certainly the second watch I felt was more unsettling because of that. I'm seeing that much more clearly, that kind of commentary on internet culture and that kind of stuff. So sorry, I know it was a bit rambly, but there we go. That's my dumb thought.
That brings me to a question, which is therefore, how do you, especially on second viewing, how did you find the ending where everything is kind of put in place? In a, there's a traditional happy family having a more relaxed, quote unquote, normal life. Do you find that comforting, or is it an illusion of comfort?
I mean, I still found it comforting, because I think one of the things that makes this movie work for me is that despite how bonkers it is in terms of its story and its visual style and its pace and the things that it chucks at you as a spectator, is at the heart of it, it's about a mother and daughter. That's the central kind of, yes, okay, you've got obviously the Michelle Yeoh character Evelyn and her relationship with her husband, and that's kind of fraught. Oh no! Sorry, I accidentally pressed the thing there. Sorry, I was just looking at IMDb for character names and pressed on the wrong thing, and then there was noise. See, internet problems. I've done it again. Shut up, Kirsty.
I think we'll leave this in, Kirsty.
Yeah, we'll leave it. No, I think
seems
it's fitting.
appropriate.
It's fitting. It's like intrusion of the internet. So obviously she's dealing with, she's this woman that lives in this kind of internet age. And again, the thing I thought was interesting is that this kind of version of her daughter, who is the antagonist, who's called, I don't want to press on IMDb again because it's going to make a noise at me. Is it Jobu Tupaki? Yeah.
She calls her Jobu Chewbacca at one point.
Yeah. So that kind of version of her daughter is, kind of like a representation of the, kind of digital native, kind of, what are they called now? Not the millennials, after millennials, generation, whatever they are.
I lose track. Is it Z?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but just this, the kind of these people who've kind of grown up on the internet and who are used to the world moving so, so quickly and putting so much stuff in, or emphasis on, particularly devices or indeed bagels, putting everything on the bagel. But the sort of mental health fallout of that, of not knowing how to cope with it, not having the skills, and parents as well not knowing how to deal with kind of their children who are feeling very derealized and kind of detached from anything and not invested in anything, and so I think that at the heart of it there is a really kind of relatable human story that's actually really simple. It's not dissimilar to something like Brave, except the focus is different. The focus here is on the mother rather than the daughter, and that makes it, I think, that's the kind of thing that you can kind of grab onto emotionally as you're watching, I think. So yeah, I didn't find it an unsettling ending. I find it quite a reassuring ending, but it doesn't mean that the world that it presents is any less unsettling or kind of anxiety inducing. And you have to remember as well that the kind of the films, the major kind of thing that creates stress for our protagonist in that is the idea of going to the tax office.
Yeah,
that's kind of where it all, and that's where it kind of all starts off, and that part of the film presents, the IRS lady played by Jamie Lee Curtis as being like the big bad. She is threatening and horrible because
with the wonderful name of Deirdre Deirdre.
Yeah.
Oh no, Deirdre Deirdre. That's her name.
And it's such a wonderful performance as well by Jamie Lee Curtis. Just such a, it is kind of totally committed to, the kind of realness and also the kind of monstrosity of that character. Just brilliant.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's that at points that's a horror role for her, but there's also a human side to it. She obviously plays several different versions of the character.
Yeah.
She's always been someone who fully commits on screen. I can't think of a movie where she's phoned it in.
No.
But, apart from maybe Halloween Resurrection. But that was a contractual requirement. It really gives her a wonderful character that she absolutely runs with.
Yeah. Seems to be having everybody in that movie seems to be having so much fun. But
there's nobody who doesn't seem. Yeah, there's no weak link in it. I mean, as we said, that the fact that the main actors have all been nominated for Oscars is entirely justified. And then outside that core cast, you got James Hong, who I guess his role is probably too small for him to have really been in consideration for an award, but he is giving an amazing performance. He's another person who's always dynamite on screen. He's in several of my favourite films.
And Jenny Slate as well is.
I was going to say on the West Wing.
Yes, sorry.
It's all right. But no, go on.
Yeah, no, Jenny Slate, who kind of American comedic actress, is the dog mum character in there, and she's in Parks and Rec, amongst other things. Okay. She's always just kind of lights up the screen. So it's great. When we were, because I watched it again over the weekend, partly in preparation for this, but also because my husband said, "Oh, I really want to watch it again," and we put it up on obviously you get on Prime, you have your kind of screen before you press play with a little blurb, and it said unlikely hero brackets Michelle Yeoh, and then kind of goes into the narrative. And I said this friend, I was like, unlikely hero Michelle Yeoh, like have they the person who's written this, have they ever seen Michelle Yeoh in anything? Because hero, I mean, I know the character is, but it was just when you're kind of going, Michelle Yeoh is an unlikely hero. No, she's not. She's kick-ass and badass, and I'm so delighted that this is playing to all of her kind of her strengths, including her ability to kick ass on screen, because she's wonderful.
I love the way that in one of the alternative realities, Evelyn is basically Michelle Yeoh. I mean, they use footage of Michelle Yeoh at the press launch of films like Crazy Rich Asians. I mean, there's a shot in it where you can see that that's where she is. It's written behind her. And she's a martial arts star, and she's the one thing I don't know is, can Michelle Yeoh sing? I don't know if that's her voice or not in the character,
Yeah.
the version of Evelyn that's the singer.
Yeah.
But the kind of film star is basically, just Michelle Yeoh. And yeah, she's absolutely wonderful. And I mean, if you started from the casting description of the character of an unlikely hero, you would not go to someone like Michelle Yeoh. But she's also an amazing actress, and she can sell all that. I also think that there are certain moments in the movie which are not action choices or like martial arts choices, but probably only an actor trained in those things will do them, although she's using it in the service of creating the opposite of that character. So the bit right after the first kind of action sequence in the film where Alpha Waymond has just kind of just owned everybody in the IRS office building, and then Michelle Yeoh is kind of hiding behind a desk during the whole sequence, and after it's all settled down, she comes out from behind the desk in a kind of crouch, and she's walking along in a squat. You know, she doesn't want to stand up because she doesn't feel safe. It's like you've got to be pretty flexible to walk along like that. I think most actors would have been crawling on their hands and knees. But also it's a great comedic choice. You know, it's kind of, it's uniquely Evelyn, I guess. And her whole physicality as that character is kind of hesitant and tentative and kind of withdrawn. The way she moves, the way she doesn't expand out to fill the room, she kind of retreats into herself, which is Yeoh is portraying that physically. It's obviously also key to the whole kind of concept. It's what allows Evelyn, I think, to kind of broach the multiverse, is that she has that kind of inner imagination. I'll just say a little bit about how I saw it then. So I also saw it on the big screen. I'm really glad I did, because I think this is really cinematic. I didn't choose to go and seek it out because I didn't know much about it. I knew that it was getting a bit of buzz, and I knew that some people were comparing it favourably with Doctor Strange, which I hadn't seen at the time, but I have done now. But basically a friend just said to me, do you want to go to the pictures? And that was on, so we went to see that. And it's an incredibly visual film. You know, it's a story that's unique, but uniquely suited to the medium. You know, I don't think it would work if it was a novel. It wouldn't work as well even as a graphic novel. It's not just the visuals, it's how they move, it's how they cut together, it's the way they're linked with music and things like that. And for that reason, I think it's a brilliant choice for Best Picture, actually. I'd be very surprised if it won. But there is more cinema in every minute of this film than in a lot of whole movies. It is absolutely firing on all cylinders. I don't think it's flawless, or rather it didn't entirely work for me. There are parts of it which I could criticise, mainly, and a few people have echoed this, I think it's a bit long, and it felt long to me in the cinema.
It didn't on the first watch for me, but on the second watch it started to feel a bit baggy. Which is a shame, but on the first watch I didn't feel that, but on the second watch I started to feel that a bit more, so I absolutely hear that as a criticism of it. It's
a weird criticism. It's like you're consciously thinking this is wonderful, but there's just too much of it. I'm losing my stamina for it a little bit. When I watched it again, actually I broke it up into bits. And also so often some of those bits I watch several times, which this is a really dense movie as well in parts. And it really helps to be able to do that. I think it's funny because it's a strange thing to observe about a Best Picture nominee film, but it's got cult film written all over it, and cult films are watched in bits, and they're kind of almost by default they're lopsided. Certain things about them get emphasised over others. I feel like this movie, if it were not a big hit and an Oscar darling, it would be a cult film that would gain and gain over years.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm still sort of slightly, I don't think I'm going to get over the shock of it being such an Oscar darling for quite a while.
Yeah.
Because it does feel very contrary to the, as we've already said, the films that the Academy normally likes. But I think that there's maybe an element of sort of recognizing that in sort of honouring this film in this way, that they're doing quite a lot for, kind of the representational politics that have dogged it in the past in terms of being, too ethnocentric and whatever. So, I think I would like to hope that Michelle Yeoh's a shoo-in for the Best Actress award. She already picked up the Golden Globe for it, so I'd like to think that at least if nothing else, it gets that. But I would be delighted if it got Best Picture. I honestly would, because it just, like I said, it just feels so original. The other thing I was thinking about it as well on the second watch is just like the costume design is so amazing. It's so well done, particularly kind of Jobu, whatever her name is. I'm not going to get it right this episode.
So many different costumes.
And
you can't even take them all in, really.
No. And then it starts towards the end of the film as well, when you kind of get into kind of closer towards the bagel. It gets really ostentatious in terms of its costume design. It really starts to remind me of I'm going to do, who are we talking about? The Japanese costume designer who did Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yeah,
Eiko Shioka.
Yeah, so I wonder as well, I can't remember if she did The Fall by Tarzan Singh. It has also this really beautiful costume design that's really ostentatious and kind of baroque and, kind of slightly surrealist. Yes, it is. It's the same. Eiko Ishioka. Yeah, so that feels, costume-wise, particularly that back end of the film, we've got those more kind of grand, surrealist kind of pieces. It feels like it kind of echoes of that, and also architecturally, there's kind of elements of The Fall, I think, going on there as well, which I appreciated because as has been well documented, that's very much kind of an aesthetic I like. So, yeah, and then the weird bagel bit and the rock bit. Yes. The rock bit's amazing. That was a highlight.
No, the rock bit is possibly my favourite part of the whole movie, actually. And while I was watching that scene, the name in my mind was one that I thought I should mention to you because it's part of our shared history. Douglas Adams.
Yes.
I mean, in a way, maybe not so much. It doesn't so much remind me of his work as the movie. Do you remember the bits in the Hitchhiker's movie where they did almost for 5 minutes? It was a bit like this movie where they were in different. Suddenly, they were made. It was the infinite improbability drive sequence, and they were like they were knitted figures, and they were weird. They'd turn into objects, and at the great moment where it's like, I feel like I'm a sofa. I know how you feel.
Yes. No, there is a very Douglas Adams sort of sense of humour about this at times, undoubtedly. That kind of the absurd and the mundane, kind of juxtaposed beautifully. It's funny, actually, I was listening to, I think it was one of Mark Kermode reviews, and he talked about that this is a film that, so I just need to kind of recall it correctly in my head before I speak it out loud, because otherwise I'll get it totally wrong. He talked about how this is a film that sort of, like The Matrix, sort of relies on this idea that, that all of us feel, that sometimes like the world is out of whack, or there's something wrong with the world and we've got, and then he talked about actually that kind of connection of like, that's a trope of science fiction of, the kind of ontological insecurity or the doubting of your world. But how Douglas Adams, kind of addresses that by going, no, that's everybody. Everybody feels paranoid. That's just perfectly normal paranormal. You're not special. There was nothing wrong with the world. It's just you're paranoid. And he said that in relation to this film. So I was like,
yes,
yeah.
I now remember hearing that review. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I didn't. As much as I was enjoying the movie and amazed by it, maybe because I'm thick, I didn't make the connection
Sorry,
between...
the one thing you are not is thick, Dan.
Oh, bless you, Kirsty. But no, I don't know. I sometimes have my suspicions, but anyway, yeah, I didn't really get the kind of the idea of existing in the multiverse might be a metaphor for kind of growing up in the post-internet world and having all the information and all the different point of views at your fingertips for your whole life. But when you explain it, it does seem like a really sound reading of it, and it makes total sense actually. I suppose maybe if I'm to defend myself, the thing which stopped me reading it like that is they sort of say, and I think it's maybe a mistake that they say this, that in the universe where Evelyn was the amazing person who invented verse jumping, she creates Joe Butapaki by encouraging her own daughter to learn about all the different universes. And in a way that obviously supports the fact that they're an estranged mother and daughter for any number of reasons in all the different versions of them. But that's the one thing which is out of sync with the metaphor, isn't it? Because if your child is growing up in the post-internet age that you didn't grow up in, that's not your fault as a parent. You couldn't do anything about that. I mean, maybe, I suppose you could say that as a parent you have a responsibility to try and understand your child no matter what the circumstances, and if you haven't done that, then that's an issue. But I don't think it. In a way, I think the movie is about that. It's about the gap between parent and child and allowing it to grow. And I just think that this notion that the original Evelyn, the one who invented verse jumping, kind of forced her daughter to learn this stuff when she didn't want to, is just it's a bit weird. It's a little bit less universal than the idea of just growing apart from your child. Yeah,
I mean, I sort of saw
that. Go on.
No, I just I think. Go on, Dan. Go on. You finish your thought, and then I'll.
It is only like 2 sentences of dialogue in the movie, which it's not a major thing. They just sort of say that. I don't. In a way, I think maybe if they'd cut that bit, you wouldn't notice it not being there, because I think the idea that mother and daughter just grew apart and don't understand each other for whatever reason is naturally understandable. But I suppose because of the way my brain is, I kind of focused on that line and thought that they were going to kind of go into specifics of it, which the movie then doesn't really do.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. You're right. Kirsty? I was going to say that it sort of in that sort of metaphor of it being about the kind of internet and like most parents, of I suppose of Evelyn's age and younger, grew up with some, or at least kind of were young with some level of internet, and that sort of ideology of the internet being a fantastic tool that we can use to connect with each other and learn things. And of course, whilst that's still true, changed. That's not all it is anymore. And as a parent, certainly I'm aware of a daily guilt that I have allowed my children too much access to the internet, and worry about the impact that that's having on them and will continue to have on them. So I think that for me, as a, that was kind of how I responded to that idea, particularly once I kind of grasped the idea of the kind of internet metaphor. And just to kind of, obviously to kind of connect it to Bo Burnham before, but in Inside, he does another song, which is called "Welcome to the Internet," which is again another wonderful song, which is sort of about the sort of snake oil salesman kind of, everything, roll up and, kind of come inside, look at everything that we have, and like everything that you can desire is all here. And the kind of refrain of the song is a little bit of everything all of the time.
Right, okay.
Which is, kind of obviously echoes everything everywhere all at once. In terms of that idea of it's just stuff, and it's all there, and it's endless, and it's, and that, as I said, it kind of mirrors that aesthetic, but of the film, and that kind of possibility that we're, one of the ideas in Everything Everywhere All at Once, of the kind of conceits of the plot, is that, kind of she's aware of all of these different versions of herself, these infinite versions of herself with infinite different outcomes and skills, and that we're kind of constantly on the internet thinking about ourselves in relation to all of that stuff, the possibility of the other lives we could have had and aren't living. And so the film sort of deals with the idea of, kind of disappointment. Evelyn is a really sympathetic figure and a kind of tragic figure, because it's really clear that, she's not where she wanted to be in her life in a range of ways. And, it's about...
in every way.
Yeah, in every way, exactly. And what I found really just delightful about the film is not that only, obviously, it centres a woman of colour, but that it centres a woman of colour of her age, which, again, we don't tend to, films often ignore, or at least marginalise women who are, in their late middle age. And I thought it was really, really wonderful that it sort of, in a very humane way, but also in a very stylish way, which made her kind of the hero and dynamic and all that kind of stuff, talked about that, the very human and kind of sense of being in middle age, and realise that you're a bit past it, and that those opportunities have largely passed you by, and that you're also, kind of distant from your child, who you're also watching potentially not live the life that that they are, kind of capable of. And it is really human, as ridiculous as the film is at times. It is like I said before, it's a really human story and very relatable. And between you and me, I'm not a person who gets overly emotional at films. My husband is, though, and I know that he cried both times we watched this film, because it's so impactful. But he wouldn't mind me sharing that, because he does respond really emotionally to films in a really beautiful and open way. And it does, it affected me, but it affected him particularly. He really loves those stories that are about parent and child, particularly. So,
bless him, he's a fantastic man. Bless you.
Yes.
Yes, I love a movie that reminds me that I have emotions. It happens too rarely, I have to sadly admit. I didn't really... this film doesn't tap into my emotions in that way quite, but I did know where it was coming from, and I did feel the sincerity of it. It makes total sense to me, but maybe it's a function of going back to that idea that it's just a bit too long. There is a sense I can't. Maybe Ian would have something more to say about this if he was here. I don't want to be I don't want to have the arrogance to say, now if I'd written it, it would be like this. I can't think of a way that you would improve it, because it's such a incredible sprawling film. It's not a sprawling story in a way, like you say, it's a very simple story, but the way that they've told it cinematically is so incredible, and surprising in so many ways, almost all the way through. But I did have this nagging doubt that, if somehow if they could have got this into 90 minutes, would it have just sung as a movie? I don't know that you would. I don't know. I think maybe there are a few bits in it that kind of go a bit, that labour some points that are maybe some of the more obvious points, and you could get rid of those and concentrate on the really original stuff. But I don't know the movie well enough, having only seen it twice, to kind of point out what those would be. But I'm loving hearing you talking that way about it, and I'm loving your insight into it, and it makes me want to watch the movie again, which I think I will. It does have that wonderful thing, and this was the most Oscar-y thing about it to me, is unlike a lot of movies, especially genre movies, which are created according to certain conventions and things, a great deal of this movie just feels like life, but admittedly a comedic exaggeration of lots of things about life, like tax and all that. But just the moments, the way people talk to each other, the randomness of just the minute to minute of daily existence is really well captured. I don't think there's any moment of it that feels rote or fake, really. And I can't remember where that thought was going, to be honest. But I do think that because of now I remember. I think because of that quality, that moment to moment kind of truthfulness, and in a way polish of it as a film. I don't want to use that word suggesting it's kind of overly stylized or anything. It's just very well done. I think that means it will be easy to revisit, possibly many times. Possibly not always. You won't always watch the whole film, but now and again sit down and watch kind of the middle of everything everywhere all at once. I mean, I love I kind of love the feeling that you get in the middle of the movie of being lost in the world of it, where Evelyn is still trying to work out what the hell's going on, and keeps going between universes, and you meet Alpha Gong Gong, who is a wonderful performance by James Hong. Suddenly he's basically been napping through the whole movie, and suddenly he's kind of commander-in-chief of the multiverse's military forces, which is kind of wonderful. I mean, possibly I'm saying this because I did watch a lot of those things loads of times, because I got interrupted repeatedly at kind of that moment in the film, but I found that I didn't really mind watching bits of it over and over and over again. I feel like you could lose yourself in those scenes.
And I think there are, just because of the nature of the sort of fragmented narrative, but in the way that's what the narrative is. It's about kind of fragmentation and these different sort of trajectories that the film goes off in. That it does feel like a film that you can just take these little bites of, and like undoubtedly we already talked about the rock bits, but you have these little kind of favorite moments. And again, I just remember being just so utterly charmed by, and I think it's a weird word to use, charmed by just the unexpectedness of certain elements of the film. So the wonderful kung fu fight sequence that involves dildos. It's just like,
yes,
I mean, it felt very Daniels, you know, like,
Yes.
it's like, oh yeah, this is them. But it was like, I've never seen this before, and I may never see it again in cinema. And that, you know, it was just delightful.
No, absolutely, I agree completely. Although when you mentioned that scene when we were messaging, I'd forgotten about that moment, and I thought when you said dildos, you were using that as a metaphor for the sausage fingers.
No,
But then I watched it, I was like, oh no, there's literally a kung fu fight scene with dildos in it.
yeah. And then
that is
there's
incredible.
there's the whole bit, and I think it's probably linked to that, where they're, you know, in order to, what is it, that part of the kind of the mechanics of sort of jumping to the like the next, you know, is that you have to have some sort of physical shock. And so there's a bit where they're like they're all trying to
I know which bit you're talking
there
about.
are butt plugs involved, because the Jamie Lee Curtis character has them, doesn't she, as trophies.
Yes.
Weirdly, and so they're all trying to, like, without pants on, those kind of henchmen are trying to, you know, land on one.
Yes.
In order
which
to
is,
like, which is just bizarre, and it's
one of them has to jump through the air pantsless and has his genitalia mosaicked out on the screen.
Yeah.
Which just the fact that they mosaic it out, I think, is entirely intentional, because I imagine, I know that you know, if they did show that, I don't know if you can legally. It used to be illegal at one point for a man's penis to be on screen. I don't think that's the case anymore. But I'm pretty sure that if they did show it, it would limit. It would have an effect on the certificate of the movie or whatever. It would limit the audience. But also, you know, you can do things with costume and lighting and stuff to hide bits of people if you need to. But I love the fact they just didn't do that. They're just like, we'll point the camera straight up at him and just have a massive mosaic effect. Basically for the whole scene. And then, like a minute or two later, there's another kung fu fight scene in which he and another character have both got things sticking out of their bums. Just for the whole scene.
I think this is the best picture nominee. That's just, it's me. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like, I love it. Like, I'm here for this. I love this as a, you know. And if it takes best picture, then that will be, you know, it'll be just delightful, because, like, you know,
it would be amazing. We're going to talk about this again in a couple of months, because I will say now that it definitely won't win Best Picture, surely. But I really hope that I'm going to come to you on the podcast in 2 months ago. I was wrong. I was so wrong.
Yeah, it would be nice to be wrong about that. Yeah, I mean, I suspect it won't, but it would be delightful if it was.
Yes, it would be amazing if it was. I think it's the only film on the list of Best Picture nominees I've seen anyway. So it's not like I have anything serious to say about the others. But yeah, for sheer chutzpah, for sheer cinematic ingenuity, for the sheer uniqueness of it, I think it should win Best Picture. I mean, you know, when you look at the list of movies that have won Best Picture, for me the recurrent thing about them is that they seem quite boring as movies. You know, there's something really staid about them. This is not that. It's everything that cinema should be. You know, and therefore I can't think of a better choice for Best Picture.
For me, I think it's that, like, what was last year's Best Picture was Nomadland, wasn't it? Chloe Zhao, which is beautiful, and it's not like there is, you know, I hear what you're saying. For me, this is sort of kind of an earnestness about, you know, a kind of obvious sort of worthiness or about the films that the Academy tends to kind of go for, where they, you know, can kind of morally sort of slap themselves on the back and said, "Oh, well done," you know, we've honoured this picture that is about something really important, or, you know, I mean, No Man Land is stunningly beautiful and tells a really interesting story and is very Oscar worthy. But I think for the Academy, it was like, well, we'll be giving our best director, not kind of award to the first woman of color to receive that award. So and that's not to diminish the result of it, but I do. We know historically that the Academy doesn't like, for Best Picture, it doesn't like genre, and it doesn't tend to like comedy particularly. And so I agree. I don't think it's actually going to win, because I think it's too bonkers. It's too left field. It's too crazy time.
He might win in. Yeah, he might win in loads of the other categories. He just won't win Best Picture.
No,
I would say.
No, I think we're much more likely to get a kind of more serious, kind of winner, more earnest, worthy winner, and then it'll have recognition in other categories. But
this seems like a point to mention, though. Most of the Academy voters are actors, so they are moved by great performances, and I do think the actors their work here will be appreciated. We must mention Kelly Shu, who I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name properly, but and she is the newcomer of the cast, or at least she's completely new to me. Her performance is stunning. I think she might be the best thing in the movie. Not to take anything away from anyone else, especially Michelle Yeoh, but she's absolutely great, and maybe has the most difficult role, in the sense that her character is young. The actor has to be young and yet portray all these different levels, and kind of project a sense of ennui, which is contrary to their age. And there is nothing that she does that she doesn't do perfectly. And also the way she sings certain of her lines. I think my favourite moment is the bit where she sings the line, "Sucked into a bagel." That was just
absolutely
incredible.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful performance, and I get what you're saying. I mean, I think Michelle Yeoh is fantastic, and for me, it's sort of not resurrected her, but sort of brought her back to sort of mainstream prominence that we perhaps she should have had all along. But the thing with Evelyn is that she is, on the whole, this kind of like, the things are happening to her, so there's a sense of the consistency of the character through.
She's reactive.
She's reacting to the, which is important, because I think we as a spectator are aligning with her, and we're also like going, oh, what else going on? But you're right in terms of the kind of the role of Jobu Tabak. I don't know.
Well, yes.
I'm not going to get it right. But and the daughter, on whose name escapes me, is that there is that duality in that role, which is really complex, and which she handles. Like the moments that she kind of arrives, sort of fully formed as the sort of antagonist. There's a wonderful, playful malevolence about her, which is really confident. And I think that it's definitely she offers this really, really compelling performance. So,
I want to tell you what, I think, just picking up on what you said about bringing back Michelle Yeoh, what's really wonderful that struck me about this movie, I don't think she's ever gone away. She's kind of gone from strength to strength in a way, but she's gone through a transition which female actors in Hollywood have to go through, whereas wherever they start, they end up as the kind of older character actor. So she was an action star for a long time, then she stops doing the action and does the character roles. I remember seeing her in the Danny Boyle film Sunshine, which was an amazing 16 years ago.
I know.
you know, she's just playing a character role in that she doesn't do any fighting, and it's like, she's already reached this point. I mean, it's really quick as well for actresses. You know, it seems to be once you're over about 32, it's like, welcome to the mother roles and the grandmother roles, and you know.
Yeah.
But what I love about this movie is that it draws upon the fact that she's an amazing character actress now, but it also brings back the kung fu stuff. Yeah. And you know, it's time they find. I wish they'd made that. Do you remember when there was the Expendables franchise where they kind of reheated all the male action stars? There was talk for a while of doing a female version, which would have possibly have been called the Expendables. I don't know how serious that was, but and to be honest, I don't think if that was made now, it would be able to afford Michelle Yeoh, but she would certainly be the natural lead for it.
Yeah, and because she was in so she was in Star Trek Discovery as well. So you know, she's again, there's another kind of compelling and interesting performance there. Not quite obviously kung fu fighty, but you know, certainly a powerful female role.
Well, no, I've seen that show, and I think she's one of the best things in it. I'm not a huge fan of the show, and obviously it is an action show, but she doesn't do a lot of action herself, at least not particularly more than anyone else does in it. You know what I mean? Whereas this film really showcases her skills in that department, which is wonderful to see after all this time. Yeah. So Kirsty, we're coming to the end of our time. So I think I shall offer you the last word if you'd like it. Is there anything you'd like to say about this movie that we've not covered so far?
I think, much like the multiverse, there are endless ways of talking about this movie, and I don't think we've probably done it justice in the time that we have had. No. And I mean, you know, it's such a fun, interesting, but if you look at it through the right lens, unsettling movie. That, you know, I'm really excited to see what the Daniels write and direct next. That'll be interesting. And I, you know, will be firmly rooting for its Oscar success, obviously, even though it might not necessarily get that. But yeah, that's all I want to say. And also, everything is on a bagel.
Everything
on the bagel. On the bagel.
I'd just like to say that as a Daniel myself, I do appreciate the fact that these two directors called themselves Daniels. Well, you know, to fully credit them, it's Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, isn't it? But yeah. I think the poster said a film by Daniels, which was just lovely to see. Even though it does kind of hint at the return from beyond the grave of a certain famous British TV magician. It's not him. Yeah. It's a different Daniels.
No, although I hope the next film also includes him, because it would have been nice to have him, you know, as a sort of
Daniels.
Just like a walk-on cameo. Oh,
in a film by Daniels.
Yeah. Well, he's been in their previous two, so there's no, you know. I think just try in all the Daniels in Daniels films.
Yes, I didn't.
Daniel Craig.
I didn't realise.
Daniel Craig. How many other Daniels can we come up with apart from you?
The Daniels verse.
Dan Stevens. Oh, that was the other thing. Actually, I wanted to say earlier. You talk about sorry. It's like again nebulous thoughts that connected to this movie. That you were saying before about stylistically how you didn't think it was similar to anything, and actually one of the things that I felt like it was similar to is Legion, in terms of its
the
bonkers,
TV show.
Yeah, its bonkers styling felt at times quite Legion-esque, although, you know, Legion maybe on a bit of a bigger budget with maybe a bit more clarity.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting point, and also something else I thought might be a good thing to end on is having just listened to a very interesting interview with the directors on a podcast. Let me just bring up the title. No, I've already minimised it. Oh well.
Oh dear.
Because
we wouldn't actually recommend another podcast on this program anyway.
No. But anyway, there's a very interesting interview with the directors on a podcast about screenwriting, which Ian pointed us towards, and I will link to it in the show notes. But one of the things they say about it is that they made this movie in 8 weeks, which I think is incredible.
Wow.
Absolutely
No, that
incredible.
That's really. I mean, if you think about it from a production perspective, though, there aren't a huge amount of locations. Principally, it's around 2 locations. Principally.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's a bit easy to handle. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing that kind of choreography and those kind of set pieces, that's 8 weeks is that's pretty good going. And it wasn't made for a huge amount of money either, was it? It was like 25 million.
Right.
So not massive budget either.
I think on paper it looks like your normal indie movie, but when you've got so many million cutaways to different universes and things, it doesn't. None of it feels like they're overshooting or overstretching their resources. It's all there, and the idea of pulling all that together in 8 weeks is mind bending to me. So it's an incredible logistical achievement as well. I think the movie. So, right, Kirsty. Well, on that note, then we shall say farewell for another period of time. Thank you so much for another fascinating discussion, as always. Dear listener, thank you for listening to us. We hope you found it enjoyable and interesting. We shall be back. I know not what way we shall be back in. I would like to say that sentence again in a way that made it elegant, but I'm not going to. Goodbye, everybody. We love you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts. Produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. Presented by Kirsty Warrow and T.D. Velasquez. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music and to Brian Gorman for our original artwork. All dialogue and music clips from films, TV shows, and trailers are used for the purposes of criticism in the spirit of fair dealing as defined in UK law and fair use as defined in US law. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, www.andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. Or visit our Facebook pages at AndNowPod or at Lee Cushing Pod. Follow us on Twitter at AndNowPodcast or at Lee Cushing Podcast. If you'd like to donate to us, please visit patreon.com/AndNowPodcast. And now the podcast stops.